Hi, everyone. Michael, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. Beth and I are really excited to share some of these insights that we've gathered from a bunch of case studies, research, and our engagement with, honestly, hundreds of organisations in our experience. Just before we jump in, and I guess before we formally introduce ourselves, we really want to keep this interactive. So plenty of chat. We watch the questions. Let's see if we can get a dialogue going. And I think we'll kick off now. So firstly, thank you again. And just to us. So I'm Elliot Donison. I'm the founder and managing director at Payble, and I'm all about customer experience, innovation, and helping organizations bridge that gap. And Beth?
So I'm Beth Morden, head of marketing at Payble. I've worked in marketing for a number of years, a good 20. I'm not going to give away the full amount. I've worked across large, big banks and startups too. So lots of learnings to share. And this is my personal passion. So something that I'm very keen to share with you is around behavioural insights and how you can embed those into your processes. So I hope that you got lots of learnings today.
Thanks, Beth. So firstly, as I said, we're going to keep this interactive. So it's time for everyone to say hi to each other in the chat. Now, if you look on the screen, you'll find the chat icon just in the Zoom tools. If you want to share your full name, where you're from, and your role, I know a lot of people here will know each other, and it'll be nice to see each other's names pop up. Also, it means we can see in the chat too as questions come through. So go ahead and click that chat button and start a, there it is. There we've got Jane coming through. So Jane wins the First Mover Award. So well done, Jane. Let's see a few more come through. Here we go. So go Rebecca. There's Michael. Got Teresa. Awesome. So let's keep those coming through because it's about almost 50 people here, and we want to make sure we can all wave to our friends. And secondly, while those are coming through, as Michael said, there'll be polls throughout. Let's keep those interesting and respond. They just select your option. There's no big reveal. We just want to grab the data and see and get a pulse check on those each time. And with that, I think we've got one more bit of housekeeping, which is just to say who we are, which I'm sure you're all wondering, who are these Payble people? So our mission is about ending what we call billsiety. And so we help organisations, and particularly local government, with adding insights and payments to the innovation process. And we've got technology that helps engage residents, gets them engaged with payments, and we can activate recurring card payments. And we do things like activating SMSs, automatic reminders. If a resident can't pay and they want to activate a payment arrangement, we can do that through our payment gateway. It's really, really straightforward technology, but we see it adds a big benefit to customer satisfaction. And probably, as we're finance professionals here, quite interested in this, gets more payments through on time at a lower cost. And so that's about us. And the final thing on that is we say we're backed by the best. So Commonwealth Bank has invested in Payble. They're our largest single shareholder, and they invested in us because they share that vision in improving payments and trying to end billsiety, those moments of billing stress that we as professionals can prevent. So that's us. And now we'll kick off. So just to start, I want us to understand firstly that behaviour has changed. So I've got a poll, and so Kyle, if we can pop that up, and this is a bit of a cheeky one. Improving customer satisfaction and delighting your community is a job for who? And this is fine, we just want to check the poll works, but what's our thoughts here? Is customer satisfaction and delighting the community, is that for the engagement team? Is that a job for everyone? Or is a job for everyone but us as finance professionals? And so let's see if we can, 5 more seconds. All right, let's see what we all think as our first pulse check. Everyone, well, that's a delight, isn't it? So we've hit, looks like we've hit the right mark here with helping finance professionals delight customers. And that's nice to know, though. And it's, as I said, it's a bit cheeky, but often we don't think about customer satisfaction in our role in finance. We think of it as mainly an engagement or a satisfaction function, but not something that we need to do in our core business. So firstly, COVID has changed things, and citizens now expect considerably more, and this is recognised by government. Something you're probably feeling as well at your council is those impacts on the customer service levels. Some great stats out of Victoria, where they do the statewide community satisfaction survey. 32% of residents are rating their council still average to very poor. Consultation and engagement is still in the top 7 issues. And that's the key one. When I've had conversations with local government leaders around Australia, there often is this sense that, oh, well, consultation engagement, that's about the DAs, or that's about these big community changes. And it is about those things. But as local government leaders, we need to recognise it's also about the things that we can do. It's also about how our payment processes work. It's also about how we do or do not engage our residents. And that's why we want to look at this as a solution, as a sector, to delight our residents in the work that we do, because we can confidently improve that. Now, everyone's seen this iceberg image before. You know, what's below the water. And our take on this for councils is that you may have residents who look at your rates payment. Residents may continue to pay their rates, but they maybe experience stress and anxiety as a result. And as councils, we don't know if that's the case if we don't ask. So we often see only the residents that don't pay and move into arrears, or those residents that are proactive and reach out to us to say request hardship. They're the only people we're seeing engage. And at that point, when somebody's requesting hardship, it's already too late to proactively support them and get that resident out of a debt cycle. So the inverse here is that if you can proactively contact your residents, if you can start a conversation and give them the ability to stick up their hand and say, hey, I need something, then you can improve satisfaction. The lesson for finance professionals here is we need to think about that invisible middle. So we've got here on the right, let's call that people who always pay. Then we've got here on the left, people who never pay. And we look at that as perhaps hardship and debt collection. But there is this invisible middle who may be struggling that we don't know about, or who may just benefit from more flexibility, more options, those sorts of things. We would ask finance professionals, do you know how big your middle is at your council? Have you measured it? You probably don't. And there are things you could do today to do that. You could send an SMS to residents and ask, do you need more time? You could look at the arrears list and say, what else can we do? We'll show you a few of these methods. And just keep in mind that as finance professionals, it's our responsibility to understand and respond to our community's ability to pay. It's not up to our community to come to us and tell us when they're having a poor time or a poor experience. So our first lesson, so to meet our residents' demand for digital. Beth?
So I've been in banking, like I said, for many years, for big brands across Asia, Japan, London, Australia, and it's, as you probably are well aware, the speed of change triggered by the pandemic has been enormous. It's really interesting. For example, the QR codes that were originally considered a fad are now being used by my mum and dad quite easily, without any hassle, without any advice. And if any of you are big fans of the Super Bowl, you might have seen that there was an ad recently on the Super Bowl that just was nothing more than a QR code. I mean, and that's how easy now and comfortable people have become with tech. I mean, the change has been enormous. So at previous organisations where we were having lots of multiple, encouraging people to use the web, encouraging people to use QR codes, where I've been at Lloyd's and Travelex, etc. Now this is just the norm. And I think that speed of change has been enormous and is here to stay.
And here's some of the data on that. So the average Aussie now spending 6 hours per day on the web. QR codes dramatically increased in use, astonishing numbers the last 12 months alone, and will continue to rise. We saw a rise of QR codes about 10 years ago, trailed off. I think they're here to stay, and I think we should take advantage of them. shopping online, regular behavior now as well.
So this was some interesting research that Deloitte had done at the back end of 2021 on their digital consumer trends. You can see here COVID has clearly changed the way that we behave. Most Aussies, interestingly, do their banking via their mobiles. They're comfortable with that. That's interesting, and hasn't changed in the last year. But what you can see is the pandemic has has made a shift in behaviour too. So for women and for the 25 to 44-year-olds, they now prefer to make those online purchases via their phone, and that's been a clear shift from laptop, which is interesting because I think when we reflect back on how that can be at the council, residents now want 24/7 access. They want to pay multiple payment methods. They want desktop, they want mobile, and this is the new normal.
So let's take a quick sense check on the poll. So our second question is, as finance professionals, do we think our councils are meeting our residents' changing demand for digital? Good, I can see them coming through. All right, let's give that 5 more seconds. If you haven't voted, pop it in. Okay, so do we think our councils are meeting our residents' demand for digital? Almost 50-50. And so we've got 46% thinking yes, we're meeting the demand, and 54% saying no. And interesting, I wonder if the question was, are we exceeding demand, how that would change as well? Are we going above and beyond what we think we should do to meet that need? And so the lesson here for finance professionals, I reckon these ones are pretty straightforward because the data is really clear. So as leaders, we need to embrace the changing preference for mobile. Most organisations, large organisations, think of Telstra, Energy Australia, their default billing is now mobile-based, a lot of web links, easy to manage and change your payments via SMSs, for example. We should ensure we're providing QR codes for easy payment. Remember, a QR code is an extraction of a URL or a link. You can put heavy data in that link that is complex, like payment reference numbers, email addresses. You can put it in that link, so residents don't even need to re-enter that as they might scan to pay, which is something we do at Payble. And finally, you should give your residents the option to transact without human intervention. As finance professionals, I know we look at costs, and we look at cost to serve and cost of call center. This is something that is often a cost benefit, but also a huge satisfaction benefit. People don't like waiting on hold. They don't like calling if they don't have to. And there is still a large amount of paper-based processes that could shift to without human intervention if we took a leap there. And I'll show you some of those shortly. So now to thinking like a retailer, to buying and using buying psychology, which Beth is an absolute expert at.
So can we run another poll here? So the question we have for this poll is, who here has used a buy now, pay later?
And we've got, so thinking through, have you personally used an Afterpay, a Klarna, a Step Pay, which is Combank's one? What else is there? Affirm. PayPal now has a buy now, pay later option on checkout. And there's dozens more, isn't there, Beth? Zip, I think we've got a photo on the next page. All right, Beth, do we want to see the results?
Yes, please.
Wow. So that's interesting. So here we've got 39% of us have used a buy now, pay later, so it's called 40%, 60% haven't. That's interesting. That's almost the opposite of the average Australian. So isn't it interesting? So 2 in 3 Australians now have used a buy now, pay later, and we're finance professionals, so we understand how buy now, pay later works. We're in the sector, we're innovative, but we don't always represent our residents. We're not our average resident, and we know that. But I think sometimes we forget that. I think, I like to think of myself as a customer experience expert, but often I do think, well, what do I think before I think, what does the average person think, or the person we're targeting? And there's probably other ways that you're doing this. For example, you might still, or not you, but your council might still have call centers or a preference for desktop, because we think, well, the average person still wants desktop, when we've just seen, well, the shift is towards mobile. So what the important thing to do here is circle back to your residents, is to ask them, is to engage with the data and ask your residents their preference, or to test things. Try both, have both options available, but really on the theme of meeting that demand for digital. Another thing that's quite interesting, just on buy now, pay later itself, is how it's moving on credit cards. So there's been a shift of, especially in the younger generations, a shift from preference of credit card to a preference on buy now, pay later. And you can see this in the data. And that has, if you look at buy now, pay later, that has some benefits for merchants and some benefits for consumers. And Beth's going to talk a bit about that in detail.
So we've seen this massive growth across Australia and globally too, to be honest, for buy now, pay later. And the demand is both there from retailers and from consumers. Really interestingly, why retailers want buy now, pay later is people tend to spend more, they buy more, shop more frequently, and are more loyal to retailers that provide it. A recent study in the US showed that 28% of consumers were more prone to repeat shopping with merchants that offered a buy now, pay later. Nearly a third of them made purchases they wouldn't have made, they would have postponed. And 24% that said that they were able to shop for more expensive items. So the demand is there from the retailers. Obviously, they want to facilitate those payments and encourage, particularly in the COVID environment, people back into their stores or to payments online. But interestingly, it's not just being pushed out by retailers. I mean, the clear evidence is that it's being demanded by consumers too. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. So, and these are kind of psychological reasons why we like buy now, pay later as individuals. We know that it helps with budget and flexibility, that pay in full helps to reduce the cognitive load. So people don't have to think through, can I afford it? That pay in full makes it more manageable. And we know it enables that instant gratification, that get it now, so you don't have to wait. So those are all interesting reasons, but there is more to it than that. And actually, really interestingly, there's a professor called Billy Sung from Curtin University who's looked at the research behind the psychology of buy now, pay later. And what he says is that it actually activates brain regions that are involved in reward processing. So basically, these areas that get activated when there's a reward or when we're processing the value of a reward. And also, interestingly, on the back of that, they've looked at new marketing and economics research that shows that when we have to pay for a product, the opposite happens. So what we actually see is that it's the psychological pain that comes from paying for products. And what we're seeing from the buy now, pay later is that both reduces that pain and delays that pain. And so from a rates perspective, it enables the positive to do something now. So make the action, buy the item, pay the rates, but remove some of that negative psychological pain that comes with making a payment. But I am very aware too that it can be dangerous if it's not used correctly. Flexibility, we know, is really helpful and really supportive to clearly a large proportion of the population. But of course, we all have fears about how buy now, pay later works and what that means for consumers and their budgets and habits. What I take from that and what we take at Payble is that consumers demand flexibility. We know that flexibility equals customer satisfaction, and we know that it reduces anxiety and creates a better payment experience. And we've seen councils use this model, the flexibility without a buy now, pay later, with people using before pay, if you like. So if you can pay your rates down in instalments before the due date, that enables the flexibility. And that's another option to improve performance of payments.
Right. And so the lessons here, I think, is stark. Aussies want more flexibility, and something we can do as finance professionals is deliver that. We can actually reduce the physical pain, which is what it shows in the brain. There is pain associated with a large bill, and we can reduce that by offering flexibility. It doesn't have to be buy now, pay later. Buy now, pay later has proven the theme, and it's got consumers more knowledgeable of flexibility. And in fact, the demand for flexibility, it's an expectation now. It's not a nice to have. And it's not just for people in hardship. Hardship is a process, and we understand is absolutely a vital part. And normally flexibility has been limited to, say, let's say quarterly installments for rates. And if you wanted more than that, and I'm generalizing here, but typically if you wanted more than that, there's a process or there's a hardship element, or you couldn't easily activate, or all we offer is monthly, for example. As finance professionals, we should be encouraging more flexibility and aligning systems. So if a resident would like to pay fortnightly via recurring card or direct debit or however they'd like, let's let them do that easily and without the hassle of, say, needing to just call someone. Let them enroll, use those themes of technology. It's also better for the bottom line too, because if you're collecting more cash, in that case, you're potentially collecting cash from a resident who might need to budget fortnightly, who otherwise saw a $2,000 or $1,000 rates bill and wouldn't have paid it and would have waited, delayed, and we'd never have known about until it got right down the costly end of collection. So a quick poll on flexibility itself. Do you think your council should improve flexibility? Now, there's a bit of nuance here because we know that flexibility isn't just an on or off switch. It can be a bit more complex to interact there. So a couple of options. Yes, definitely. Yes, but only if it didn't increase my team's manual workload. Yes, but only for hardship. Or no, I don't really believe in flexibility. It's not something people want. Or no, we already do enough. So in our council, perhaps you've got all the options already. It's already fully digital. Anyone can, tap to choose weekly payments by recurring card and it's automatic. So let's pick our options there. All right, 5 seconds and then we'll close it. Okay, let's have a look. Interesting. So isn't that an interesting split? If you add up the top three saying, yes, we should do more, it's about just greater than 50%. And then there's about 37% saying at their council, they already do enough. And that's great. If your council's already on has already, for example, doing flexibility, any sort of payment method, you can access it digital. Good on you for getting there. You've followed the theme of flexibility, and I'm sure your residents are really, really thankful for that. For everyone else, well, we should do more and we should influence our councils and our organisations to offer more. All right, we'll move to the next one.
Okay, so this is the EAST framework. So here at Payble, we follow the EAST framework and we've seen it's effective on changing behaviour. It was originally developed by the UK Behavioural Insights team, the Nudge unit. And so as I go through some of the suggestions, there are a lot of UK-based suggestions here. So I'll talk to those. It's really well established. It's been featured in lectures at Harvard and Washington. Many people have contributed to it, including Professor Richard Thaler, who was the winner of the 2017 Nobel Prize in Economics. So it's grounded in good, solid theory. It's used at a government level, both here in Australia and in the UK too. And what does it stand for? So it stands for make it easy, make it attractive, make it social, and make it timely. So EAST. So here we are with make it easy. There's 3 ways in which you can make it easy. They're harnessing the power of defaults, reducing the hassle factor of taking up a service, and simplifying messages. So the advice, I've got a bunch of examples as we go through. So make it easy, the harnessing the power of defaults. So here's an interesting one, and we'll have probably witnessed this kind of stuff ourselves. The highlighted box there, you can see the example from Amazon, the default option. So Amazon has defaulted here to choose paperback, and that's because they know that I don't own a Kindle. Whereas if I'd signed in and bought via Kindle, they probably would have defaulted to the cheaper option at Kindle of a Kindle version. By making that obvious, that highlighted option, you're reducing the cognitive load. You're just making that one step easier, and it's more likely to be adopted. There are other ways you can make it easy by reducing the hassle factor. So here are 2 great examples, one from within Australia, one from within the UK. So I'm sure Manny is on this call, hopefully he is, but so he should well know, CBA has a benefits finder app that was launched in September 2019. What it does is it looks at your accounts and gives you suggestions of the benefits that you might be eligible for. So far, from September 2019 to August 2021, they've had 1.5 million claims started by that app, which is awesome. And it's just they probably wouldn't have been started if you hadn't have just made it that one step easier for them, which is great. Another great example here is from the Behavioural Insights team in the UK, and they wanted to improve tax collection and make it easier for individuals to pay their taxes. One of the simplest interventions that they did was testing the simple impact of directing letter recipients straight to a specific form, rather than getting them to go to a landing page on which there was the form. And that minor change, so it wasn't any change to copy anything else, that minor change made a significant difference. And that increased response rates from 19% to 23% with just that tiny tweak. It's just, again, thinking through all the ways you can make it easy and reducing some of that friction. Simplifying messages. So there have been some great research recently between the Australian government, and they've partnered with the Australian energy regulator to look at applying behavioural insights to energy bills, in particular in Australia. And what they found was that bill simplification based on some key principles can again reduce that cognitive load placed on consumers and make it easier for them to understand and more effective for the bill to be used. And there are 4 key principles around this. So, and they may seem obvious, but if you follow that structure, that'll increase your performance. When the bills were issued, they made sure that they had simple and conversational language, no jargon in there, no unnecessary comments about things, keeping it nice and simple. Presentation, making the bill visually attractive, has an important part to play. Salient, you've got to make sure that the important information again is salient, and that there's a logical and careful structure to the bill. And now these guiding principles are used across Australia for energy bills.
And sorry, I've got the, the annotation stuck there. Let me just get rid of that. Awesome. So the lessons for finance professionals here. We should copy what Amazon does is the first one. They've got a lot of data. There's a reason why they're such an amazing company growing so incredibly. And that's because they do things like use the power of defaults, especially when you can contextualize. Step 1 is what's the generic preference across the population? What do we want? And then step 2 is let's contextualize that to this person. If we know what this person's like, for example, we know that this resident typically pays their rates late. So when we send their rates notice or their rates reminder, we proactively prompt them to enter a payment arrangement. Whereas we know someone else who's already on direct debit, we don't need to do that because they say they might pay on time. We should reduce friction and hassle, and we should then we should try and do that in all facets of life as well as in the workplace as professionals. And finally, we should use those good design principles, language, presentation, salience, and structure on all messaging, not just the payment request or not just the invoice. Across all media, we can do better in how we present information. So let's have another poll, just looking at making things easy. And I want to look at that theme of flexibility again. So we were talking about flexibility and 50% thought we should do more. So we'll look at how easy have we made that already. So at your council, how can a resident activate a flexible payment? Now, let's try and think beyond a quarterly payment. So how can they activate a monthly or fortnightly payment if that's offered? Do they have to fill out a paper form? Can they request it online, but then there's forms, or they have to call, or it's all fully digital, or immediately they can just scan or pay flexibly and you reconciled it on their end. So they can set up a recurring payment directly through the, say, website on card, and they don't need to do any paperwork. So we'll spend 5 seconds if you want to pick your option there of how easy you've made. I'm not sure. It's a great question, Teresa. I'm not sure if you can pick. I think you can try and pick multiple, and if it works, we'll accept it. But if you only pick one, maybe just do the most common one. All right, let's see. Interesting. So this is good because this shows at that 45% mark, in some way we've responded to the drive for online. Then that's step 1. So you can start the process online. Not everyone has to start with a call, but obviously we're then still adding forms and some hurdles there. 25% already fully digital. Fantastic. Okay.
So the next part of East is make it attractive. And there are two simple ways in which you can make it attractive. Attract attention and use incentives. I love the attract attention because really it's about thinking how creative you can be. Because you can draw in images and colors and personalization, but it's about being interesting and different and making it stand out from the regular comms that we get, because we get bombarded with communications every day. In my personal email inbox is full of a whole bunch of emails, some of which I just don't even open. And there are a couple of ways you can do this, and I've drawn on a couple of examples here, which are good examples. There was the Irish Revenue, actually. They doubled the response rates to a survey that they were running by simply attaching a handwritten Post-it note onto the envelopes, which I think was really interesting and an engaging way to get response, because again, it draws your attention in. The DVLA in the UK, they had a challenge. Around 250,000 unlicensed vehicles were in Great Britain at the time of the test, and that was about 40 million, in lost revenue. So they tested the original letter, which had a hard-hitting message like "pay your tax or lose your vehicle," and a simpler letter. The simple letter didn't really have any impact at all. What was interesting though is they tested a third letter, which included the image of the car in the letter, and that attracting the attention. And you can see here with eye tracker study on the right hand side there, it attracted the attention of recipients, and that idea that losing their vehicle, it became more salient to them, and it increased response rates to 49% relicensing rate. So it's just about being, I guess, thinking when you're sending out your payments or your notices, how creative can I be? What can I do to make mine stand out from the other communications that's getting sent to my residents?
And that's huge. So a Post-it note doubling response rates. Amazing.
There's a second one here about using incentives and rewards. So I wanted to make this personal and give some local examples here, because I know, so I pulled out Gladstone. I know a few councils offer a discount like Gladstone do for prepayment, and they offer a 10% discount if you pay within 60 days of issue. And here's another awesome example from the Sunshine Coast. Then they're still running that today. The objective here was to convert people to email rates notices, and they offered a chance to save $1,000 towards your rates. And this incentive has helped in doubling signups to e-notices compared to pre-COVID rates of signups, and most recently added an additional 3,000 residents in the last year. We also have an example here from Payble, because we use the same incentive thought at Payble too, to increase adoption, where we had a $10 cashback offer to encouraging people to move to direct debit, and equally it's been effective for us too.
In fact, it was really interesting for us seeing with our energy clients when they trialed this, that the positive payback period on $10 cashback, how short it was, because as we know, direct debit's more likely to be paid, but also scanning to activate cut out the paper process and the core. I can't remember exactly what the months were. It's probably confidential data from them, but they pushed the cashback incentive because of the payback period was so short compared to arrears, postal reminder, and those sorts of things.
So the three key lessons here are testing. What might work for some might not work for others. So test, and test incentives. We know that incentives are a good driver of changing behaviour. Make the payment communication engaging. Follow those design principles we talked about before, but think about how you can bring some colour or personalisation into the comms. And just don't think about it as just a rates notice or of the reminder. These comms can be done throughout the payment journey and that payment cycle. So it certainly could be done before if you wanted to. Make it social is the next, and this is by far my favourite of the East framework. Social proof and social norms really influence how we behave. People just copy other people, and whether that's consciously or subconsciously, we just copy other people. So there's some great examples here. Netflix, I'm sure you've all or a good proportion of you will have a Netflix account and have looked at if you're probably lazy like me and can't be bothered to flick through all the things, it's, you know, what's in the top 10. There's some good examples that originally came from hand towels reuse. So hotels looked at how they could encourage people to reuse their towels. It's benefit from a cost-saving perspective, but also from a environment perspective. And they did 3 tests. They put little cards in the bathroom that said, please reuse your towels, it's good for the environment, versus please X percentage of people in this hotel reuse their towels, to the final version, which is making some connection. So the people that reuse, X percentage of people reuse their towels in this room, and they're in this room where you could draw that connection with somebody that had been there before you, increased response rates, and they had a 33% reuse rate off the back of that. It's been used in government too. The HM Revenue Customs, they tested that with tax returns. They had a problem with people not paying their taxes on time. So they sent the letters, typical letters that focused on the consequences, like, you know, if you don't pay your taxes, there'll be interest charges, fees, legal action. And it did make a small improvement, but they added just one line. The only change was one line to the letter, and it said 96% of UK taxpayers pay their rates on time, or the tax on time. And the result was £5.6 billion more was collected that year versus the previous year. But adding the next part in it to make it more personal again, when they said X percent of people pay their taxes on time in your postcode, that resulted in a 79% response rate versus the 67% response rate. And it's been used in Australia too, to encourage to stop fare dodging on public transport. And the New South Wales Government's Office of State Revenue also redesigned their payment notices and added a pay now stamp to it. They simplified the language, but they added a social norm about the fact that most people pay on time. And they've scaled that across New South Wales, and that equated to nearly 9,000 fewer people losing their licences or having their vehicles deregistered, and an additional 1 million in revenue each year. So
Beth, you made that point there around particularly paying taxes on time. And what was it? The line was 96% of, can you tell me it again?
96% of UK taxpayers pay their taxes on time.
And then that was step 1, and then step 2 was?
In your postcode. They just made that slightly more relevant so that it wasn't a blanket stat that didn't apply to me. As soon as you can make that apply to you, you have an additional, it increases performance.
And so that, as finance professionals, that's data we have. So it is accessible. You know, it's in the system. You can probably get out a Pathway or Tech One, but you do know this. And the question is, how can you use it? How can you actually go from, well, we can pull the reports and see who's paid and who hasn't, and someone could do the sums and tell us that. In fact, you would already know your arrears balance. It's how do we go from there? Here's the data point. To let's communicate it. Do we add it to the rates notice? Do we put it in a reminder? Before we go big, do we test it? And then the big one for me is how do we as leaders convince council that this is something we should do? Because it has good benefits for our team and has good benefits for council. And also, if we are helping residents pay on time, then there's a satisfaction benefit. And so, Beth, I just stop there because it's a really good example of something that if we wanted to, and if council was supportive, as leaders, we could do this, and we could do it quite quickly in our councils. The question is getting there and how we manage that, and whether we want to put the effort in to do it.
So that's kind of summed up my lesson. Try and find that social norm and make it as targeted as possible, and bring it through to your communications. So the last one is make it timely. Try and get over that procrastination, be proactive. And there's a couple of ways in which you can do that. Interestingly, Westpac and the Treasury and Prime Minister and Cabinet cooperated together to look to see if they could use behavioural economics to increase payments from consumers. They reached out to 24,000 consumers who had consistently made low repayments in the last 12 months, and they sent them a range of email and SMS messages. The study found that the email had zero effect, which I thought was quite interesting, but the text messages increased the credit card repayments by 28%. about $134 on average. And the positive behaviour didn't just end at the trial. 12 months after, those customers who'd received text messages had balances of $365 lower than those that hadn't. There's another good example here I pulled from Western Downs, looking at animal smart notices, and about 10% of customers do their registrations this way. So we are seeing it in councils, not always for all payments, but for some payments that text messages, reminders and SMS messages is working. I also thought I'd pull out about the being proactive thing here, because timing matters. So Her Majesty's courts in the UK have used their messaging and testing timing, whether it's worth doing reminders or proactive messaging. And they send text messages prompts to people to pay their court fines before bailiffs come 10 days before the bailiffs are due. And that has increased payment rates by 2 to 3 times. So the timing of when to message is also really key in making it timely.
So I thought it might be useful to look at how a quick example of how local government, how you can use SMS. And let's look at rates specifically, because that's a big payment that often residents struggle with. So you can start basic. You can send a reminder like, don't forget your rates are due. And that's a useful reminder. In fact, it's quite similar to the reminder that Westpac used here to get that 28% increase in payments. The next step you could do is add some personalization. So it's, hi, John, your rate payments of $1,980 is due on this date. And then you could add a response mechanism for them. If you need more time, call us. And of course, calling might not be your preference. You might want to put a link there, or you might say, it's better to get some engagement and get some outreach, because that creates satisfaction. At least we know when or why people can and can't pay. But then we should go deeper. We should go actionable. So what if we took that lesson of personalization, but then gave the direct link to pay? So if you, on modern technology, you could make this link personalized to each resident. So that link, for example, pre-fills their amounts. They don't need to re-enter payment reference numbers. It's an export. You align it to the import. And then each resident gets an actionable SMS. And then finally, you could open up the conversation. So you could do a message just checking in. And this is back to that theme at the start of, have you asked? As professionals, do we want to know who needs more time to pay before it goes into arrears? Can we start solving that before it gets to collection? And we can, and SMS is an easy way to do it. So, hi, John, we're just checking in. Reply 1 if you'd like to pay, or reply 2 if you'd like to know about options. And when John replies 1, you'll know that John's all right and he can pay today. And then you set the autoresponder, which we do automatically in Payble, to send a payment link like this. But if they'd like to know more about flexible options, you send back a payment link that has the method to create a monthly payment or a fortnightly payment. And you've cut out an enormous step here of engagement, but you've also reduced cost and got a phenomenal experience for the resident. And so we recommend, at council, you've probably got, you may have an SMS service that people might use it internally already for surveys. Just start using it and then drive value further, add personalization, then make it actionable, or of course use Payble and start here. But we also have tools here around just starting really basic too. And so a checkpoint on that, I'd love to know, are you using SMS in your finance team already? So are you, and this can be including that basic one. So no, not yet. Yes, generic reminders, that basic one. Yes, some personalized messages. Yes, actionable, or yes, they are conversational. So two-way. And this doesn't mean you use them constantly, or it's part of your default, but maybe you've just tested it. Maybe you've looked at it. So let's see, go 5 seconds. All right, let's see the results. Are we using SMS? Fantastic. And so we've got 44% already doing that stage 1 process around generic reminders. And then we've already got some people moving into actionable, and 32% there, who probably now know that that's something that we should get council support to do, because we can add a lot of value there to experience into the bottom line. And so the lessons, well, firstly, send SMS reminders, but the element there is before payments are due. Ideally, you'd have a campaign and you test these things around all aspects of what Beth showed there around East, multiple types of messages, multiple times, make it proactive. We should be genuinely seeking to engage as well as remind, asking those questions, are you okay to pay, to prompt a conversation. In fact, sending a campaign like a survey, do you need more time, actually can help you build data internally to present to council and say, hey, we sent an SMS out to our residents in arrears, and say there's 10,000 of them, and 1,000 responded or 200 responded, and more than half said that they want more time to pay. And that's proof that we should invest in making some of these processes more efficient, and you can scale that. And finally, make it easy. So it's probably a bunch of ways you can add shortcuts to your process. It can even be, housekeeping of things that have been on the agenda but might have missed because of other priorities. Make it easy and bring those to the front so that we can, so that you can improve the situation at council. I'm just going to move to the final slide here, and then we'll go into questions. So this is a summary of some of those lessons, just in a quick bullet point form. As leaders, we should find out our residents' ability to pay, ensure it's mobile friendly, provide that flexibility, be the councils that are offering those solutions to residents in a proactive way, best practice design, testing incentives, including personalization. You can really drive value with that, and using reminders at the right times. And we say SMS is always a really easy one to get started with. It's also one that, with people's preference for mobile, you get a good response from. Another poll question, and Brendan, I can see your question in the chat. We'll come to Q&A at the end. If anyone else has got questions, you can just pop them in the chat now as well, and then we'll have a few questions there to respond to at the end. So our final poll: do you believe that with council support and by implementing some of these ideas, you could help delight your community and improve satisfaction? This is almost zooming out right back to the one at the start. Do we think we could make a difference and delight our community? No pressure on the answer here, but I'm sure we all have a theme. All right, let's see the results on that one. Wow. Well, that's nice. And it's good to see that there's no there's no naughty people clicking no for the fun of it too, which often does happen. So that's fantastic. So now that concludes the formal part of the webinar. So we'd love to go to Q&A. And Brandon, awesome question. So we'll start there. Guys and girls, just send through some questions now in the chat. Keep them coming. And just while those questions come through, we wanted to let you know about an awesome offer we have. If you want to see 5 wins that your council can implement in 5 weeks, personalized to your council. So I'll get my team to do a quick assessment of what you're doing, quick conversation, and then we can give you a free scorecard on some wins that you can make. That can be for something that you can do internally. It can be something for council, but implementing some of these innovations and insights. Key one there for us is what could you do quickly? Because it's really, really hard to do all these things. There's a big program of change, but there's probably some small things that we can identify that you could do quite quickly with the technology you've got, the processes you've got, that would improve the bottom line for you and your team. And most importantly, increase satisfaction for your residents. Now, Beth, is there any final notes you have, or should we move to Q&A?
No, that's it. Just to say, yeah, let's have a go through the Q&A, but hopefully you found those insights interesting, and obviously post the webinar if anybody wants any more details. I'm happy to share those.
Thanks, Beth. All right, so the first question. So Brendan's asked, what are your thoughts on accounts with multiple owners and SMS? Do you see value in SMSing all owners, and how would you manage potential conflicting responses? Really, really good question. At Payble, and our experience with our data is and if you don't collect a primary or a preference as part of your process, obviously if you do collect primary, we'd recommend, if that's what the customer's opted into, use primary. But let's say you don't, they're both there, we recommend SMSing both. The reason for that is if you use the technology in the right way, let's say you're using something actionable like an SMS like this, then with that link, if one resident pays using that, one of them, say, I call it husband and wife, the wife or the female pays, then the husband clicks that link. If the technology is set up right, it will already know that the bill has been paid. So it will say, oh, this is already paid. If you don't have that technology, and that's something Payble does, if you don't and you're back here, that's okay. It's actually better to have more than one touch point than none, and the fear of not doing it. As Beth showed on this data, doing the reminder both change behavior now, but also change behavior in the future. And so if you have the option to change behavior for both owners once and in the future, it's probably something you should take. I know there's a fear among many councils, and particularly, often among, like, say, older councillors, and they think, no, SMS, that's hassle, we can't do that. The standard now is that people get SMS reminders. It's common, and it's not something that people object to. It's something they expect. It's a good thing, and so we should think about it as value we can offer rather than hassle or an annoyance. We can offer value to our residents by sending this, so we should do it. Michael has asked, do you think that council billability will increase with likely impacts of inflation and interest rates? Yeah, we really do. In fact, there's been really, really strong data that we've analysed recently on household spending and the impacts of price increases on stress, on obviously affordability. We think it's huge, and we think as councils, you can be in a difficult position because you have an obligation to your community to do the best you can by them, as in to delight them, to make, you can cop direct criticism. If they want to turn up at the front desk and make a scene, they can. It's not the case with our businesses. And so because of that, it's on us as professionals to help. It's on us to put in the systems and the tools to reduce that. And really, it's something that I think we should do. Like we chose as an organisation at Payble to work with local government because we believe that we have this mission around helping consumers end those moments of stress. And you probably chose local government for a similar reason. You've got a desire to help your community. And so we should do these things out of both it being good for our business and good for our budget and good for our organisation, but also because these are the right things to do. And we can prove that. And it's the right thing for councillors to do. And it's the right thing for council to lead. And frankly, we've probably seen, as leaders, we're all seeing that often councils are slower to adapt than, say, business. But we should be leading. We should be instituting leadership and showing business the right way to do things for customers and for our communities. I can see, now, Drew, I can see your question. Now, Narelle's got a question here. I'll come to you, Narelle. Narelle's asked, for confirmation, Payble is a buy now, pay later platform being built for bills. No, but very glad you asked that. So Payble, we don't do buy now, pay later. We're the interface and the system that you can use to engage your residents and get them to enroll in a flexible payment arrangement. There's no loan here. It's just, instead of a resident having to know that they can get a payment arrangement, ring you up, do paperwork, activate it, all these manual steps, what Payble does is we can send the SMS to your resident, say, did you know there's flexible options? And when they interact with that, they come through to a really clean gateway, and I'm just going to jump to that. They come through an experience like this that says, great, activate a flexible payment option. And that's just enrolling them in, say, a quarterly payment, if that's your preference, enrolling them in a monthly payment, fortnightly. We have the ability to transact and pull the payments ourselves, so we can use our processor. We can have a conversation with council about how you'd like to do those payments. But think of Payble not as buy now, pay later. It's we're the facilitator. We do the communication with the residents, and we cut out the paperwork and the annoyance that can happen at council to enrol people in a payment arrangement. But there's no, it's the flexibility, but it's none of the debt, none of that sort of element. And that's why it's really useful, because you can use what you've already got agreed and in place at council, and you can use those benefits of things like SMS and we give you the technology to make all that sing through one platform. Now we're running out of time. Michael, do you think it's all right if there's more questions coming through, we just stay on and answer questions?
Yeah, for sure. If there's a few more questions, Elliot, I think that's fine.
Perfect. All right, we'll keep any questions coming through. And for those of you that have a hard stop, now, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to email myself, elliot@payble.com.au for your free scorecard. And we'll talk to you soon. And so next question. So Drew's asked, how does a council get started with SMS? So firstly, you need, well, the reality is you need one bit of data, and that's a mobile number, because that's all you need to SMS it. The second thing you need is the technology to send the SMS with, and there's lots of tools, and Payble's one of them. And the final piece is you and your team or council, if you need permission, the commitment to do it. And so we can help you build that case for commitment. The technology is actually quite straightforward. Depends on where you store data. Is it CRM? Is it, even Pathway? It might be the name and address register. The way Payble works, as an example, looking at Pathway, is if you have a name and address report, and if you were looking at, say, SMSing people in arrears, it's the outstanding balances report or the arrears report, we join those two together, and then we can SMS and understand for people in arrears, getting those paid. Otherwise, you might already in your CRM have an export of mobile numbers. But yeah, so you need the data, and if you don't know where it is, you can find it, and we can help you find it. And the second one is you just need the commitment to do it. Add those two things together, really, really easy to get started. Cindy's asked, is this mainly for rates, or can it be used for accounts receivable? Yeah, all these principles, if you're talking about sort of the principles, of course they can. And if you're talking about Payble, it can be used across accounts receivable. Really, we're ingesting data and sending a response based off data. This thing needs to be paid. We look at rates just because of obviously a significant line item of income for councils, and also with arrears on rates particularly rising, it's something good that we use for examples, but it can be used across all receivables. Susie's asked, what's the legal implication for using flexible payment option for council? Susie, I might get you to expand a bit on that. So if you're talking about, say, mandated payment dates and due dates, we've done a large piece of work, and I don't want to make sure I misinterpret your question, but in council, you would already offer some level of flexibility quarterly. Many councils have chosen to go further, offer monthly, fortnightly. If the legal implication is, does this mean people moving into, say, overdue, or does council allow residents, say, to not be charged interest? If they're beyond payment dates, for Payble, you can configure the system so if you don't want penalty interest charged, even if someone goes over, it can deal with that. If you do, it can deal with that. But if I haven't answered that question properly, just follow that one up in the chat. And I can see, Michael, you've jumped in there too. Any final questions? I'm happy to spend 5 more minutes if anyone's got more. I'll just leave it on this, and I'll just pop my email in the chat. All right, well, Michael, it looks like that's the end.
Thanks, Elliot and Beth. That was very informative. And who would have thought behavioural economics would apply to local government rating and revenue collection processes? So we're in a new world, aren't we? And look, I think based on some of the notes I took, and just to quickly wrap up for everyone, and thanks for your time, is can councils be more proactive around managing the expectations of ratepayers and their residents, and being a little bit smarter in how you interact, and obviously from what you've said, being proactive rather than reactive, and that is getting in front of when bills are due with customers, providing flexible options, looking at your technology, and hopefully providing them with a better experience. And I think one thing for me, also a takeaway, is that you know, as finance professionals, we're still part of an organisation that has customer service standards. A lot of councils have customer service standards adopted. We do customer satisfaction surveys every couple of years, and it all interrelates. So if we can be doing things that not only helps just the bottom line in terms of cash flows, but provides a better experience, then we should see those results coming through those surveys, and that's ultimately what councils want. They want happy communities and good experiences. So look, really interesting session. Thanks very much. And if anyone didn't capture the details and would like a health check done, they could come through, email the LGFP, and we can pass you on to Elliot and Beth. And but thanks very much for the session. And just to quickly wrap up, everyone, our webinar series continues next month with the Department of Local Government doing an update on their sustainability framework review. So jump onto that one. But our program's on our website, lgfp.org.au. So again, thanks for your time, and thanks, Elliot and Beth, and see you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.